All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. This is the second webinar of this year's Biodesign Challenge webinar series. We're glad that you can all make it today. I'm Daniel Grushkin, the Executive Director of Biodesign Challenge.
And I'm Veena Vijaykumar, the Program Manager. The BDC webinar series was created as a resource for participating students and instructors to create a shared set of knowledge around biodesign. So we're very honored today to have Joe Isles and Anna Caralt from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation with us.
Before we begin, I just want to acknowledge the difficult time that we're all facing because of coronavirus. So for the last 5 years, Biodesign Challenge has explored what we can do with biology. But we also have to consider what we have to do because of it. COVID-19 is only one example that reminds us that we're all connected with each other and the living world. So let's not forget to reflect on that as we face this crisis. So everyone, please stay safe, stay home, and we are sending you our love and support.
Thanks, Dan. Going right into the rest of the webinar. This is a reminder that we have more exciting webinars that are coming up very soon. Next Monday at noon Eastern time, we have director Adam Bolt with us, who's going to speak about his documentary around CRISPR called Human Nature, which is extremely exciting. And all the students can actually watch the documentary online for free. So we've kind of sent you guys information through Canvas about that. And then our 5-year anniversary party will also be taking place online at noon Eastern on April 29th. We have more information through our social there about information for that too. We'd love to have all of you guys join us. So we will be sending out more information about all of our webinars and our future engagements via Canvas and our newsletter as usual. And of course on social media as well. So please do join us. Our handle is @Biodesigned, and we're excited to have you guys with us through this time of social distancing and sheltering in place.
All right, now to give you a sense of today's program, Joe and Anna will give a 45-minute talk followed by a Q&A, question and answer period. If you have a question during the talk, go ahead and click on the chat window and type your question there. After they're done with their talk, we'll MC the questions for you. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Veena, and Veena will make the introductions.
Yeah, so the Ellen MacArthur Foundation was launched in 2010 to accelerate the transition to a circular economy. Since its creation, the charity has emerged as a global thought leader, establishing the circular economy on the agenda of decision makers across business, government, and academia. With us, we have Joe Isles and Anna Caralt. As Circular Design Program Lead, Joe's role is to inspire and empower millions of designers to create products, services, and systems for the circular economy. As part of the team since 2011, Joe has helped shape the circular economy narrative, crafting stories and messages to reach new audiences and improve understanding. Anna's role involves building and shaping collaborations with organizations that develop design awards, challenges, and competitions. In addition, she is involved in the creation of a space for innovators and designers to connect, exchange knowledge, and share best practices. Previous to the foundation, Anna specialized in sustainable urban development in Copenhagen and worked as sustainable buildings design engineer in Barcelona. Thank you both, Joe and Anna, for joining us. And Dan and I are going to take our camera off and let both of you take the rest of the webinar.
Well, thank you so much for the introduction. It's a pleasure being here and being part of the Biodesign Challenge. And yeah, and we hope and expect that people enjoy and interact, and feel free to ask as many questions as you have, and we hope we learn all together. So I'm going to share the screen just a second. And I hope that it's possible to see. Does it work? I hope it did.
Yeah, it's all good. But maybe if people can't see the presentation, looks like the chat has confirmed for us that it's all working fine, Anna, so we can take it away.
That's great. Cool. So Well, welcome everyone to the webinar. How we will start, it's you probably all know this is about how can we design solutions for the circular economy. So Joe and I have prepared like a webinar with some content that we would like to share with you because we think it can bring value. And so the content for today is going to be the following. We're going to explain a little bit about what the foundation is all about and how we work across the different teams. Then we'll move deeper and deeper into what is the circular economy, what are the mindsets that we need to design for the circular economy, what are some of the strategies that we can intentionally use to design solutions that are a fit for a circular system. And then we'll share some examples and pieces of inspiration so that you can all practice for the Biodesign challenge. And of course, in the end, some Q&A. But feel free also to share questions in the meantime. I mean, yeah, we can always stop. So without further ado, Joe, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Hannah. So I won't spend too long on this because some of you may know about the Ellen MacArthur Foundation already, and much of this information is available online. But for those of you who aren't familiar with this organization, as Vina said, we were set up in 2010 to accelerate the transition to a circular economy. And the woman's name in the name of our organization, Ellen MacArthur, she was the around the world sailor, the fastest person to sail single-handedly around the world. And her connection to the economy and to the way we use resources and energy really stemmed from that experience. So she realized when sailing around the world, if you want to get around the world on a boat as fast as possible, you take with you the minimum amount of resources, because what you have on that boat is all you have. When you want to be fast and light, so you take with you just what you need, and you have to manage it really precisely because you can't get any more. So one anecdote she told me once was that when she was in the Southern Ocean, the closest people to her boat were the people on the International Space Station above her head. She was that far away from land. And when she stepped off the boat at the finish line, she asked whether our economy was any different. We have resources, many of which are finite, and we use them as if we have a limitless supply of them, but they're so important to the way our economy runs. So she started investigating the way our economy works and our approaches to create an economy that works in the long term, and reached this idea. It wasn't something that Ellen or the people around at that time invented, but really a synthesis of a few different threads, which culminated in the notion of a circular economy, and as they say, kind of the rest is history. But you can find out more about the intervening 10 years of momentum behind this idea at ellenmacarthurfoundation.org. Just specifically on the areas that we work in, for your reference, we mainly work in 5 areas. Firstly, business and government. So working with a range of through a range of partnerships with people like Google, H&M, Philips, and so on, as well as a large membership network called the Circular Economy 100, which contains around 400 organizations and institutions to try and catalyze circular economy solutions that have a real impact on materials flows. We work in learning, both formal and informal education, so through a universities network, but also through a range of live online events, a bit like this one. We work in communications, so trying to create and shape the narrative for a circular economy, really a story about a different pathway for our economy that could lead to a more prosperous future, and trying to do that through many different creative communications methods. We have an area we call systemic initiatives, which is around the materials streams that are just too complex, too complicated for any one organization or country to solve by themselves. Things like plastics, fashion, and food are the main systemic initiatives that we work on. And finally, insights and analysis. So since 2010, we've published around 20 reports on the different aspects of a circular economy, ranging from the overall economic opportunity through to the role of artificial intelligence, circular economy in India, circular economy in Brazil, China, and then on specific materials types related to these systemic initiatives, such as fashion, food, and plastics. So that's a quick run through of the way that the Ellen MacArthur Foundation works.
Cool, thanks, Joe, for this overview. So what's next? Now we're going to start going deep into like what is the circular economy and see like what we can learn from it. But just before starting, we're going to do like a small exercise. Normally we do this like in pairs because we assume that we are in offline events. But today, I mean, if you are sitting next to someone, it's good just to share that with that person. Otherwise, you can use the chat, or you can write down or draw them, like what I'll just share now. So before starting, I would like everyone to think about what is that product or that service that brings value to your life and that, sorry, and that you are very grateful for. It doesn't need to be like your phone that you probably use every day and you're super grateful, but something that you're like, oh, I couldn't live with this because I love, I don't know, painting, or I love going from A to B, and I don't know, something. And you can share them in the chat, or yeah, you can write it, and we'll give 30 seconds or 1 minute for everyone to think about that. Yeah, so I mean, Joe and I we're talking about this one. Joe, do you have any, or should I share?
Yeah, I think you should share one, Anna.
Okay, so I mean, what I was thinking for me, like some time ago, is like something that brings me value. It's like to have a bike or a scooter that brings me from A to B when I want, without having to use public transport, and also like waiting for it, and also like you get to do some exercise. So that's good. But I thought that today maybe a good example is the toilet paper, because it seems that everyone's really appreciating this invention. And well, so I will stick to that one, the toilet paper, and then we can see what exercise we're going to do with it.
So keep that in mind for the next few minutes, and we'll come back to it at the end.
Exactly, yes. Keep your product or service in mind, and we'll see what happens later. Okay. So yeah, now we're going to start talking about this circular economy and this concept. But before starting, we need to go a little bit back to the linear economy and how our current system works. Our current system, or linear economy, is based on the taking resources, making something out of them, and wasting them or throwing them out. And it's called linear because it doesn't have any continuity. Like once we have given use to those products or materials, we don't have any place where to keep them in value. And we can think about it as like the plastic bottles that we buy and we drink the water, and once the water is drunk, then we most of the time don't have anything in place to recover that material. And we could talk about some strategies that help keeping this line a little bit longer, so like stretching, such as, for example, recycling. But still, it would be much better if we could keep the product or the material in use more than using energy to recover it. So something that we've done in the foundation for the last years to really understand how the current system works is to analyze what's the state of the art of different industries. We did that for plastics, we've done that for food, and we've done that for fashion. Here we can see visual of how the current fashion system works and how the different streams of materials go from feedstock into like production, then they go to the use phase. And at some point, when the user decides that that product doesn't bring them any value, they end up in the landfill or incinerator. Also, part of these clothes, they go even to losses even before they've been used. And what this shows us, if we look into like how percentage, like we look into the top part of the arrow, the percentage of recovery of these threads, components of t-shirts and jeans and product, it's very small compared to the whole flow of resources that end up being lost, which is this 85%. So what we can say is that it's quite, I mean, it's sad that the system works like it is at the moment, but it also gives us floor for thinking about a lot of opportunities to like, and how can we convert this into a circular industry? And that's what we are here today, why we are here today. So what we do in the foundation is to try to understand and we created a framework to try to understand how we can talk about the circular economy. And we figured out that there are three main principles that can help us design and create solutions for the circular economy. The first one is designing out waste and pollution. So this principle is about how can we, instead of using waste to create something else, how can we, from the outset, from the very beginning, design solutions that won't have any waste across all the stages of its production? How can we design solutions that instead of having some components that won't have a place in the system can be all allocated to make sure that they go back to the loop? So for example, I mean, I'll take the example of the bottle back again, but in some countries, once you drink the content of some plastic bottles like sodas or water, you have in the supermarkets machines where you introduce the bottle and it gives you some cash back, and that prevents these bottles to end up in the landfill. So this could be an example of making sure that the material that you don't design stuff with that generate waste. So the second one would be to keep products and materials in use. So this one, it's about making sure that the materials, components, and products of the different solutions that we create will be kept in value. So for example, if we have a company that is selling laptops and electronics, we know that these metals are like very appreciated, but many times they end up in our drawers and we don't use those materials at the fullest. So how can we make sure and enable businesses to recover the different components and make sure that they can, for example, build new laptops out of old pieces and components? And the third one, it's about regenerating natural systems. So if we look at, for example, how agriculture works today, it's quite extractive and the quality of the soil becomes poorer and poorer as we as we harvest every season. So how can we design agriculture that is regenerative and that all the elements bring value to the soil as we grow and as we generate food for the system? So these are the three principles, and they basically underpin everything that we do in the foundation. And to move forward, so how can we divide a little bit like the different elements of the circular economy? So we created two cycles. I mean, Joe, feel free to jump in because I'm getting a big.
Well, you take a breather, Anna. I can run through this. So this is what was called the butterfly diagram. I mean, we didn't call it that. It was called we called it this much catchier name of circular economy systems diagram. But over the years, since this was first drawn on the back of a napkin in 2011, it's become known as the butterfly diagram. And we've tweaked it a little bit over the years. It's kind of become a bit of an enduring diagram. It's part of, for those of people that are interested in or work on the circular economy. And as Anna says, it's made up of two cycles, which are really inspired by Bill McDonough and Michael Braungart, who wrote Cradle to Cradle. And the two cycles are biological materials and technical materials. And the idea here, and this is really key in the circular economy, is that those materials don't get mixed up, so that they can continue to flow throughout the system. And just to talk through a couple of bits of this diagram, because there's a lot to kind of get into there, and I'd encourage people to spend a bit of time investigating it. On the right-hand side, we've got technical materials, and there are a number of different loops there. And sometimes people think circular economy is about recycling, and that's not wrong, but we call it the loop of last resort. So you would recycle something when you can't really do anything else with it. The much higher value activities are the ones what we call the inner loops of this technical cycle. So refurbishing or remanufacturing something, reuse or redistributing it, and sharing or maintaining it. And it kind of makes sense when you think about it. If you had something like a laptop, like Anna mentioned a minute ago, and you stripped it back to its raw materials, which is what a lot of companies are trying to do now, you then have to add all the energy and labor that turned it into a laptop in the first place. You have to re-add all that energy and labor. So we talk about these inner loops, keeping products in the inner loops of a circular economy in the technical cycle to preserve the integrity and the value of those products. On the left-hand side of the diagram, we've got renewable materials, biological materials, which may be of more relevance to those of you on the call today. And it's this diagram actually makes it look really simple, but the bio side is super complex, and full of loads of opportunities, maybe even more so than on the technical side. If to tell the truth, it's quite difficult to show all the different options just in one diagram, but we've nodded at a few here. So cascading materials, so a shirt that's used for clothing, becoming like a wipe or a cleaning rag or material before being used in the stuffing in furniture or in a car seat, before being used in insulation in a house. And if it's designed right and with no toxic materials and it's a natural material, it can go back into the soil and biodegrade and return value to that system. So that's kind of a cascade. And then other things like extracting chemicals from biological materials, anaerobic digestion, which is becoming more commonplace. Ultimately, the key here is to be, like Anna said, on the regenerate natural systems principle, to put back at least as much as you take out. So to ensure that those natural systems can continue to provide the things that we need in the future. So that's the butterfly diagram. And as I say, do check it out and spend a bit of time investigating all these different loops.
Cool. Thanks, Joe. Well, before continuing, and because we know that this might be a bit new to many of you, if you have some questions, we can stop here and I mean, receive those questions. Otherwise, we can also, like, you can write them down and we can answer them afterwards.
So folks, if you can write your questions, I'll just ask a real quick one. This is Dan, turning my mic back on just for a minute, if I can figure out, there it is. So something that's really interesting about biology and biotechnology products is that the wings of this butterfly, in a sense, can be brought together.
Yeah.
And there's something really exciting about that. I mean, can you talk a little bit about what that might look like?
Yeah, I mean, if I could show you the many kind of doodles of us trying to show that in like the version 2 of this diagram, I would love to try and show that, because it's kind of hard, right? So you're right, things can, in terms of trying to communicate this in a simple way, and for people maybe just getting started with circular economy, the notion of 2 cycles and kind of essentially not mixing up biological and technical materials irreversibly is super important. Like I don't know, a polycotton in clothing, so weaving together a technical kind of petroleum-based material with an organic material, so it's just a recycling nightmare. I think in Cradle to Cradle they call them monstrous hybrids, which is a really scary name, but kind of they are pretty bad. But you're right, you could get a biologically derived polymer that then is used in, let's say, in the dashboard of a car as a durable material. And that car is maintained, and you prolong the life of it, and maybe that material could go through some sort of recycling process. So really, but ultimately, that material would need to feed back into the system from whence it came. So thinking about where those materials end up is super important. I hope that's answered a bit of the question.
For sure. I think I'm not seeing any questions in Zoom right now. Let's go back to questions at the end of the session.
Great. So I'll just go.
We have 15 minutes, by the way.
Yeah, that's cool. We'll shuffle along. So just want to move on to why design is essential. Anna and I both work on the circular design team at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and it's one of our programs. And we've always said design is super important for the circular economy. We talk about an economy that's regenerative by design, and it's in those principles: design out waste and pollution. And all throughout our work, there's this notion of going back upstream to treat the causes of dysfunctional and problematic systems, rather than just downstream, end of pipe, trying to just address the symptoms of those systems. So design's always been super important. And if you just move on to the next slide, Anna.
Yeah.
When we think more deeply about it, everything around us has been designed by someone. So even things like food, which is an area we're getting more and more deeply involved, the notion of food design doesn't necessarily exist in a big way, but still there are decisions that are made during that process. If you keep moving on through this slide, Anna, there are decisions made through the creation of all the different items and artifacts in our world, in the world around us, that influence whether that product or service is circular or linear. So whether it stays in the economy providing value, or whether it ends up as waste in the ocean, in the natural environment, stuck in the back of someone's cupboard, completely unused, or in a landfill. So those decisions are really important. And we love this quote from a colleague. She's actually a kind of a biodesigner herself, Alicia Garmalevich, who says, we can't unscramble an omelette. So once those decisions are made, they're really hard to unpick. So if you design something that's like those biological and technical materials combined, that's kind of a design decision that's really hard to undo further down the line. And this links to from the product through to the business model as well. And an example we like is thinking about light bulbs. And the decision was made, as you've probably heard this one before, in Geneva in 1924 between the leaders of the most prominent lighting manufacturers of the time to limit the lifespan of light bulbs to 1,000 hours. This was the decision made in Geneva nearly 100 years ago. But at the same time, we know that that product of light bulb can last for over 100 years. So the decisions range from decisions about that individual the individual materials and the combinations of materials through to the business model and the delivery mechanism, the overall system. And the circular economy is offering a way for innovators, entrepreneurs, and businesses to apply design to rethink the product, that's the business model, and the overall system. And here's an example from Philips. This is Schiphol Airport in the Netherlands, and they are a lighting manufacturer. You won't have missed that. They make light bulbs and light fittings and lighting solutions. And they actually have changed their business model in this example, in this airport, to sell light as a service. So applying design throughout the, or making different decisions throughout the design stage to not sell light bulbs that are designed to fail after a certain amount of time, but to sell light as a service, just the service that people need, and keeping the components in use for as long as possible.
Yeah. And also the cool thing is that, I mean, just to add on, like, the very cool story of Philips, that I find it very I find it very amazing. And I think, like, now with these solution manufacturers, they really want to create products and solutions that are lasting for as much as possible and that are of high quality. So the story kind of changes again. Okay, moving to the next one.
So we've heard a little bit about the concept of a circular economy. We know that design is really important, but really we see that there are, when people move to practicing circular design, we'd speak about circular design kind of as a shorthand for design for a circular economy. And we see it as made of, firstly, a mindset shift. You'll notice, like in that Philips example, that shifting from the mindset of linear, take, make, waste, to circular and keeping products and materials in use for longer, designing out waste, is a shift in mindset. And at the heart of it is what we call zooming in and zooming out. So there's as you may be familiar with if you're designers, the familiar notion of zooming into the user's needs. So circular design has a strong affinity with user-centered design, but the piece that is really important here is also the zooming out. Zooming out to look at the overall system. So asking how you meet those users' needs, and also asking the question of what happens next, which is a really, I mean, I'm not a systems thinker myself by training or education, but it's a really simple shorthand is towards thinking systemically, is just asking what happens next. So when you've provided a solution or a product to your user, what happens to it next? Who's involved? Who are the stakeholders, or whose hands does that item pass through when it's done with that original user? And we just got a quick worked example here, which we'll shoot through fairly swiftly, of an example of how you can try and think systemically as you approach the biodesign challenge. So we've got an example of a house. I'm not an architect, but I know that you need some building materials. You construct all along this building process. There's opportunities for waste and pollution, unfortunately. When the building's done, it's typically demolished. No doubt you've seen that in the towns or cities that you live in. Also causes pollution, large amounts of noise and dust. And you end up with usually a pile of rubble, which can maybe go to some other building material, but it's pretty low value stuff. You also have some kind of empty space as well, which is a resource in itself. People live there during the time that the building's being used, and they need stuff as well. Fridges, furniture, washing machines, all that stuff needs to be created, built in factories, more pollution. The house is probably maintained a bit during its lifespan. It's worth acknowledging that. And they also produce large amounts of waste, all sorts of different sorts of waste, food waste, water, and landfill waste. Also, those goods that they use, the furniture and white goods, they end up on the landfill as well, most often. And maybe our family haven't some kids and they build an extension. They're lucky they can do that. And that results in more construction, more waste and pollution as well. So this is kind of just a very rough example and an exercise you might want to do at some point of mapping out the linear model for a building. And when I go through something like this, it gets me thinking about what the circular opportunities are. So then if you repeat the exercise and say, look, in this building, you might try and capture some wastewater and some rainwater and some solar power. Any excesses, maybe you can feed them back to the grid, because that's a system as well. Instead of demolishing the building, why don't you systematically dismantle it and get some high value materials back that then can cycle back into another building. Still, you've got to construct it. I haven't solved that problem yet. Still, people live there. But instead of just making their stuff from new every time, what if it was shared between a number of people? It was rented from a service provider, like in the Philips example, or maybe it was made locally in a local fab lab or something like that. They're still going to produce some waste, but maybe the food waste could become a fertilizer for growing plants. And they're still going to probably chuck out that old fridge at some point. But if it could be repaired and passed on to another family, then maybe that would be a way to keep it in use for longer. So the aim here is just to show that by zooming out and thinking about the system, rather than just the user needs, you can see all different opportunities for creating a more circular system.
Cool. I mean, I think this is one of my favorite examples about explaining how can we transform all the challenges of the linear system into specific opportunities. Thanks, Joe. And moving towards strategies, or like how can we intentionally transform challenges into opportunities? We've got something for you. So we know like the 3 circular economy principles, and in order to design solutions that meet these principles, we need some guidance, because then it will be kind of easier and for sure more systemic. So there's a way. So in the foundation, we created some circular design strategies that they come not only from the knowledge that's been developed in the foundation, but also from different research groups in many universities. And what we've learned is that we can create solutions intentionally that fit the system as well as the user's needs. And these strategies can be, for example, product life extension. So designing products that instead of lasting for X amount of years, they can last for 2 times that amount of period, or making sure that we can add some maintenance in the middle to make sure that they last longer. We can also create solutions that instead of being like stuck with glue. For example, tables and furniture that instead of being stuck with glue, we create them so that they can be assembled and disassembled. And in that way, we make sure that first, both cycles are not mixed, like what Joe was explaining of mixing the technical cycle with the biocycle with some natural glues, for example, or glues that contain chemicals. But at the same time, if one of the pieces breaks, we can very easily replace them when solutions are made to be assembled and disassembled. So modularity would be one of the other strategies. Another strategy that was explained previously, but we have also some examples. It's the one of converting products into services. And currently, like probably most of you have tried some of them that 15 years ago, they didn't exist. So if you tried car sharing platforms, or if you've tried any type of sharing solution that moves from buying a product into using an asset that gives you the value of that service, that could be an example. And another one could be dematerialization, which means getting rid of any type of material. So the consumer doesn't own any material, but you have access to a service. So that could be, for example, platforms to watch movies or platforms to listen to music. So we don't need those CD-ROMs or cassettes or VHS any longer. So by thinking explicitly about what type of strategies are out there, we can create solutions and combine them as well. So there's one that I really like to show as an example, that it's called Repack. This is a solution that was born in the Netherlands. So what they basically did is try to understand what's the state of the art of the delivery of clothes in the Netherlands. And they tried to understand what are the opportunities in this system for them to create a business that not only would design out waste and pollution, but they would also keep the products and materials in use. What they created is a service. So they would have all the retailers as their customers and deliver these boxes. So they didn't invent any box, but they would deliver these reusable boxes. The company would deliver them to the customers, and the customers would post them back into the public post office, and it would directly go back to the business. So what they saw as a very wasteful way of consuming, which is just like receiving clothes in cardboard boxes, they found an opportunity to convert them into a business case. So they combined all the different strategies into a business solution. And yeah, so, and before moving into the Q&A, Joe and I have collected a couple of examples of how the circular design strategies can be applied into the biocycle. And this is
Anna, we should probably just, sorry to interrupt, we should probably just do maybe one line on each of these, just because I know we want to leave some time for some questions.
Yes, good idea. Yeah, let's do that. I mean, this is just like very much of source for inspiration, so you can afterward take a look at them and read a bit deeper. So I will start with the first one. Probably some of you already know Materium. This is a website that it's built by any user from all over the world that collects recipes and information about how you can create specific solutions that are just designed with biomaterials. And the cool thing of this platform is that not only you can connect with designers that have same interests as you, but you can find recipes with materials that are found in specific geographical areas. So how can we make sure that we use the abundance of materials that are currently not used, but that could actually become alternatives for our linear system? And yeah, if you want to know more, you can Google them and find some recipes and probably play and act in the future.
When we talk about the biodesign opportunities, we get really excited at the foundation about a lot of those opportunities, and often they're related to short-lived items or things that you want to kind of disappear when you're done with them. The reason we chose basilisk here is because it's kind of the opposite. You're using biotech for an item that you want to last for a long time, so concrete. And that's one of the things we really love about circular economy, is that it's a model that doesn't just say, it's not a one-size-fits-all model. It's a suitable kind of design inspiration for things that you want to last a short amount of time and things that you want to last for a long time into the future. So self-healing concrete is a good example of that. So using kind of microbes to create limestone to keep concrete products looking good and durable and safe for a longer period of time.
Cool. Moving on to the next one. So this one is BAM, which is a company that creates activewear made out of bamboo fabrics. It relates very well what you were saying before, Joe. Like probably most of our activewear, it's got a mix of many different types of polymers, which means that if we cannot use it anymore, it's very difficult for the manufacturers, and for, like, at the moment we don't have the right technology to separate these fibers. However, these clothes made out of bamboo ensure that the materials, at least 100% of them, are made of natural resources, and we can do something out of them. But at the same time, we just like not to be boxed into this solution as unique, right? It's made out of bamboo because it's produced in China, where they have like great amount of bamboo plantations, and it's sourced in China, it's produced in China. So it's kept, like the production and extraction of resources, it's kept quite local. And this doesn't mean that now, oh, the solution for all the activewear it's using bamboo fibers, but it's about trying to understand what is it that we have out there that we can use to replace the current, or like the existing way of production. So we hope this can inspire, and we have another one to share.
Again, this is probably one, this is like a kind of bit of a hero in the world of bio alternatives to petrochemically derived plastics. This is the I think they started out being called Oho, then it was, and they're by Skipping Rocks Lab, but now the name that people know them by is NOTPLA, so not PLA, dissolvable, edible, single serve packaging used for water and things like events, marathons, festivals and things like that, but also could be used for sachets, for sauces, or for alcohol, I think is another use for them. So a great example again of really rethinking or flipping the question around plastic packaging. Often there are just people are searching for the most recyclable option, when actually a solution that just disappears when you no longer need it could be better. And what I always think about when I think about this solution is how we are really at the tip of the iceberg with what bio design can do. And people from the plastics industry, or some folks I've spoken to over the years, have said, you know, it might work for in that example, in the NOTPLA example, but it won't work for my packaging a lettuce or something like that. And I think that's okay, but we've got a long way to go. And competitions like Biodesign Challenger, as I understand it, all about unlocking that next frontier, finding out what's possible, on what's on the horizon in terms of what biodesign can do. Should we see if there's any questions coming in, Anna? I know we've been talking for a while.
Yes, we can do that. Just like very short exercise for probably afterwards, it's to think about what was that valuable product or service, and think about the different strategies that you could use to make it more circular. Yes.
Okay, we have a number of questions coming at you.
Let's do that.
So hi, Nicole. Nicole asked a little bit earlier, can you talk a little bit about more about the butterfly diagram, but as it relates to water? And I would add to that, as it relates to energy usage as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the energy one is something that we haven't explored a huge amount. We absolutely invite anyone to do that. We state that the circular economy should be powered by renewable energy for sure. And the kind of hypothesis, which again, I just full disclosure, isn't really backed up by hard research, but if you shifted to remanufacturing, sharing, reusing, that you'd ultimately lower the threshold energy for running the economy and perhaps make renewable energy more possible. I'd also add that in terms of hard research, we did a piece last year called Completing the Picture, which was about circular economy and climate change, which said that just focusing on energy efficiency and renewables is about 55% of the solution in terms of what we need to do to keep global warming within global climate change targets. The remaining 45% we believe can be addressed by circular economy measures. So definitely check out that report for more detail on that.
Next question, this is from Marinas. Is there software available for circularity? And if not, what would you recommend people build?
Oh, wow. I love that. I mean, Anna, chip in. On our side, we've created, it's not software, but a tool called Circulytics, which is a self-assessment tool to measure the circularity of a business. So that was something we've just launched this year. I mean, in terms of recommendations, I think software that I would recommend people build additions to software that people already use that can advise them on making more circular choices, which is really hard to do because it's about complexity. But kind of like an advisor that sits alongside you. You remember Clippy in Microsoft Word? Someone should make the Clippy for circular economy.
Okay, this one's from Corinne. Are there any groups looking systematically at circular design in indigenous practices and in the practices of low-resourced communities? For example, she was thinking about using rice bags to become clothes or tires to become slippers and things of that nature.
Well, I think, so I'll just say one thing, and then Anna has some firsthand experience with some work she was doing with the British Council. I would say a really important thing to keep in mind here is that notion of not designing from waste, but trying to design out waste. And I know that's super hard when some of those nations that you mentioned are kind of at the sharp end of a linear economy and they're getting the crap that is kind of reaching them. So, and sometimes don't really have the agency to kind of redesign the supply chain of a multinational business based in Europe. Totally get that. But I think we need to make sure that we're not kind of glorifying, in a sense, what Walter Stahl, another great thinker in this space, calls the circular economy of poverty, or the circular economy of necessity, where people are engaging in circular economy practices just because that's what they need to do to survive. And some of those practices are not healthy. They're not good for the people involved in them. And whilst the skills and the mindset of being frugal is important, it shouldn't come at the cost of people's health or their well-being. Anna, do you want to say something about the SSA?
Yeah, I mean, nothing. big to add, but so we've collaborated with the British Council and we've run a program called Circular Design Lab. And last year in 2019, we ran it with 10 leading designers from 10 sub-Saharan African countries. And of course, that context fits very well to this question. And I would recommend to watch one of the sessions that we hosted last week. Well, Joas hosted with 3 of the designers, well, 2 of the designers and another one, and Hannah from the British Council. And it's just inspiring. And you can also follow some of the work from these 10 designers if you go on Instagram and follow the hashtag circular designers, because they all use this hashtag, and you can find a lot of inspiring work and projects.
Great, thank you. I just a follow-up, I guess, to that one was, has there been work to bring indigenous communities into the circular design conversation?
It's an amazing thread. We did a piece of work. We did an event in New Zealand last year, and we did. It had a large involvement with Maori business owners. We're trying to draw upon Maori technical knowledge and see what the overlap was with the circular economy. And it's one of the most enriching experiences I've been part of, because whoever asked the question, I think, is nudging at some, or perhaps knows already, as many people do, that some of those indigenous mindsets are completely based on regeneration and the idea of cycles. And in Maori, in the Maori worldview, they have something called kaitiakitanga, which is like knowledge of genealogy, and the idea that you leave something better than you find it, and everything from your own prestige as your kind of family to the land that you depend on, that's passed down over generations. So you always look to improve it. You would never degrade it. And the takeaway from me was that the circular economy will look different in different places. It needs to be culturally and locally relevant, but it ultimately, and it almost doesn't matter what you call it in some respects, as long as the understanding is there. But if we can connect it into a global vision of an economy that's regenerative, call it circular, call it regenerative or whatever. But the important thing is that it is something that gets better over time, rather than just trying to stretch out that linear economy.
Okay, one last question before we go. We got a number of questions about COVID-19 and circularity, medical supplies and circularity. Has Ellen MacArthur Foundation done anything around that in the last couple of months, weeks?
Well, from my side, and maybe you know something different, Anna. I think, like a lot of organizations, we've been trying to get our head around what's going on, and trying to think about the way that the team works and sort of the kind of functional things, maybe aside from the content. I think one super interesting thing that connects is this story that you may have heard about, the Italian Fab Lab that 3D printed a spare part for a ventilator that saved people's lives. And but that's a great example of the power of new technology and the kind of mindset that is really fueling a circular economy. Like, circular economy isn't something that's just like a off-the-shelf toolkit that we're trying to impose upon the current economy. It's actually driven by a lot of the changes in society. So the availability of digital techniques and fabrication tools, the awareness of environmental degradation, and the connectivity of society now, it's kind of emerging out of all of that. And I heard that that Fab Lab, or the people behind that, got sued, or that trying to get sued by the medical company that made the ventilator or whatever equipment it was. And that shows for me just what an interesting time we're at when I think if to go back to the question, I think if there is something really timely, if people can direct their mind to it amidst all the disruption, then out of the kind of chaos could come a new way of practicing, or new ways of practicing, like webinars and 3D printing and 3D printing medical equipment, that actually we realize they're better for people, they make better use of resources, and we don't want to go back to the way they were before.
Yeah.
And Joe, that is a perfect way for us to end this seminar, webinar.
Dan, sorry. Is it possible to share just something very quick with the audience?
Absolutely.
Yeah, just a second, because we've prepared like as like a couple of slides to share our resources. So on one hand, people can find the circulardesignguide.org.com, which is a set of resources and pieces of inspiration to practice circular design with other people, and that we co-created together with IDEO. So you can find workshops that can be facilitated by anyone, and it's fun to practice circular design. Then the second thing is the Learning Hub, which is for free and it's available on our website. You can connect anything that relates to circular economy with specific topics like businesses or fashion, anything. And then the last but not least, it's about connecting with everyone that joined the webinar. On one hand, you can find the Circular Designers hashtag on Instagram. So everything that you create for the challenge, if you want to get feedback or you want to show it to the rest of the world, feel free to use the hashtag. Then if you want to connect with other like-minded designers, join our LinkedIn group. It has more than 15,000 people, and for sure you will find people that can give you feedback and ideas for the Biodesign challenge. And last but not least, if you want to be updated with our latest news, scan this QR code and fill in this form. It takes like a couple of minutes, and it will be very useful for us to know who you are and what your interests are as well. Yeah, just this. Thank you.
And Joe and Anna and their team were very kind to send us a PDF that links out to all of their resources as well. So if you're a student or instructor taking part in BDC this year, it's on our Canvas page. So feel free to reach out to us about any questions that you guys have about those as well.
Anna, Joe, thank you so much for taking this time with us. It was incredibly educational and super useful to us, and I'm sure to the students. I'm looking forward to seeing how this talk and others affect the projects from 2020 and then going forward. I think Joe summed it up. We're in a moment of incredible change, and the way that we do things are changing. And let's embrace that change and include circularity in our thinking and in our design processes. We're looking forward to seeing what people come up with. Thank you both.
Thank you so much.
You.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks everyone that joined us as well. We'll see you guys soon.